Welcome to our special Board of Education meeting for November 11th. Just to kick off before we get too far into this, wanted to talk about is why do we think about bonds? Right? When a school has a general fund probably 87% spending on salary, wages, and benefits for our teachers that teach our kids every day. That means you've got 15%, roughly, of your budget to spend on extracurriculars, transportation, keeping the lights on, roofs, tech, and anything else that makes a school function, including uniforms, paper, printers, all the above. If, as we have done for the very first time in 2015 as a district, a school district passes a bond for facilities, we can relieve some of the pressure on the general fund to focus on students. Again, relieving pressure on the general fund to pay for our success of our students. As we look forward to 2025, potentially looking at a bond, we have 11 buildings in our fleet that are all about the same age old. We've got one new building in the fleet, and everything else was built sometime between 1930 and 1967. Everything's old. It costs a lot of money to put a new roof on a building, to put a new boiler in. It's a staggering amount of money just to keep these things going. So as we look at a potential bond, what we're asking our community for help with is continued relief on the general fund so that we can pay for the academic success of our students.
Robotics, although not part of the official survey, the survey did have, when the comments were analyzed, robotics came up as a topic, I think 45 plus times. Other facilities mentioned in the survey, there was mention of a field house, robotics, and some CTE space. There was also mention of just not wanting to lose sight of CTE. I want to talk a little bit about planning toward the future. We had a question about scenario A, and if we were to move forward with scenario A, if in any way that precludes us from any future possibilities, that we're not boxing future boards and leadership in. And our analysis reveals no. Scenario A still gives us a multitude of opportunities to move forward, including if a future might still be components of what is scenario B with a single community high school. There still is a pathway forward for that. That part of the construction, the design rather, for the Northeast build can be such that it could be easily expanded if need be.
I carry a couple things around with me all the time, one of which is this 2023 assessment profile, right? This was shared in, I'm looking to Brian, February of this year? When did we do the assessment profile? The student data was shared in February of this year. And in that assessment report, MPS ranked top 4 or 5% in every academic success factor. One of the things that came out to me was we have become extremely successful with our students that have disabilities. That has put physical constraints on our buildings because we have more students with disabilities in our classrooms than we ever probably imagined in 2015. We've also had great success building a pre-K program. I think we're up well over 60 students now, 80 students. 80 in 4-year-old classrooms when we started 6 years ago was 0. And we've had extremely good success with arts, athletics, and play. When I look around at all of our extracurricular activities, whether it's band, drama, sports, robotics, every single one of those programs has had statewide success, not just regional success. And to some extent, we've created a problem for ourselves in being successful. We've put these physical constraints on our buildings, and they're aging at the same time. Additionally, when we look at how many meals our residents have approved thus far, Mr. Bonadies rightly points out it's about $1 a day for the median household in our district. And we're asking for an increase of another $1. When we look at our comparison districts within the county, we're significantly lower than Meridian, significantly lower than Bullock Creek, and probably about the same as Coleman. When we look statewide, we're significantly lower than the median statewide. I think, yes, it is an increase, and it's an increase to do kind of 3 things in my mind. Some of, obviously, what Penny has covered is foundational. We have to address safety. Those are in both scenarios, but kind of what's beyond those foundational things, it's address elementary space, replace Northeast, which is what we talked about in 2015, and continue to expand pre-K.
Question about the 2015 decision to not do anything with Northeast. What went into that decision, and why was that not acted upon, for anyone that has that context?
Yeah, this might be a team decision. So it was analysis of that building at that time. You know, the facility assessments really help you understand the condition of your buildings and whether they're worth continual investment. And at that time, it's my understanding that we were sort of put on notice that that building was nearing end. And so we did the minimal amount of work to keep it obviously safe and as appropriate as possible for student learning, and kept moving forward knowing that this would be part of the plan. And I feel like Mike did a really nice job of planting that seed back then and being very open with people that Northeast would be on the docket for the next time around.
Second question, and this might go back to you, Brian, but about a year ago, we had parents from Dow High approach us about some needs in the athletic facilities at Dow High.
Yes, sir.
And we said, let's hit the pause button on that because we're going to do this facilities assessment. We don't know where we're going.
That's correct.
If we maintain 2 high schools, do we have any sense for the price tag to bring the facilities at Dow High up to parity with Midland?
John, I don't have an exact number for you.
Baseball, softball,
Yeah, but I remember,
bleachers.
yeah, the challenges at that time are that you cannot renovate one without the other. And that's true for Title IX purposes, across school lines as well too. So,
Right.
while we have great folks that want to do great things, and they come to you and say, I really want to renovate, and let's just pick a baseball field at school A. You cannot just renovate the baseball field at school A without doing the softball field as well too, and the same across town. And so that's why when those opportunities come forward, they're 1X and they need to be a 4X, depending on the facility. And so that brings challenges along with it. But we do know that at Dow High, the facilities back there, to bring them up to par, that's included in
Yes.
scenario A. and the details of those.
I think from December, and Daryl will know for sure, I
Yep.
want to say it was 23 million investment in Dow High.
Yep.
Including some of the interior athletic locker rooms. Does that sound approximately right?
The one caveat that would be bleachers. Somebody mentioned bleachers. The difference between the two would be the stadium has the full set of bleachers. Down High currently does not.
Okay. But, just, I guess to put it in context, to maintain two, there's $23 million just to maintain parity between the two high schools. And just in the athletic facility, never mind anything else.
But that also includes an investment at Midland High
Right.
as part of both scenarios.
But does not include anything with turf.
Correct.
Concessions, bleachers, restrooms.
Right.
I think one of the important things that Penny noted earlier was in our enrollment projections, which are posted on the website as well, is we go out to 2034 in the enrollment projections, out 10 years, and we're showing 0 to potentially a 3% increase. Call it flat for enrollment projections, and that's based on pretty comprehensive work that the statistician has done on economic trends, population growth, so on and so forth.
I'll go. I'm there begrudgingly. And here's why. We don't have the exact number right now, but we know we are operating a district that was built for significantly more students than we have right now.
I think that's a fair statement.
Whether it's 9,600, 13,000, whatever it is. Our current enrollment of 7,400, well, actually, the birth rate, which is actually an even longer-term predictor, indicator of what enrollment is going to be, seems to have leveled off. So we think we're not going to continue to see the decline, but there's no evidence that we're going to see a big uptick either. We think it's going to remain flat. If you look at the birth rate, that suggests that enrollment will remain relatively flat. So we don't expect to be back at 13,000 or 9,600 in the foreseeable future. But we're maintaining more of everything than we need. We're maintaining two high schools. We're going to be maintaining multiple baseball diamonds, softball fields, bleachers, all of those other things. You know, I think when we look at the estimated remaining life of Midland High and then Plymouth, we're going to be back having this conversation in the next 10 years. I don't see it. I don't see any way around it. But we asked for the feedback. The feedback we got is, I think, overwhelming. It's fair to say overwhelmingly scenario A. We also have to keep in mind there's a lot of feedback we didn't get. And that's, look, I mean, that's on, you know, for all the people that complain about, you know, you guys aren't being forward thinking, you're not, well, those people didn't respond to the survey. We got the information that we asked for, even though it was what appears to be a very small statistical sample of the community. I guess I'll conclude my remarks with, I am begrudgingly acknowledging that the feedback we've gotten is that the people who responded strongly favor scenario A. I hope that it should not go without saying that the public needs to be prepared to spend a lot more money to keep things the way they are. We could have better facilities for our students, for our staff, and for our community, and spend less money, and yet we're choosing not to. And to me, that makes absolutely no sense at all. But that's the information, that's the feedback we've gotten. So when people come to public comment in 4 years and say, oh my gosh, we gotta do this, we gotta do this, we gotta do this, they need to be prepared for the answer to be, I'm sorry, we don't have the money, because we did this. But I don't think that's on us. I think that's on the community for not giving us the feedback that we needed to take a much further, longer-term view, rather than the short-sighted duct tape and bubble gum approach that we're about to take.
Now, I think we also need to console ourselves with the idea that eventually it's going to get used by students, whether they're 9th through 12th graders or not, or maybe they are and we don't know, but that we do need a new elementary school and we do need another middle school facility.
Yep.
And Scott, and we've been looking at this for 2 years now, and it really starts out, like I said in our last meeting, this all started from the littles. We have universal programs coming from the state of Michigan that we have to be prepared for in full rollout by 2027, which we don't have the space for. So you start with that. We're already over capacity in a couple elementaries, and we need more room and more space for these kids. Scenario B was a very different way to look at this, but it also was created for the littles, because we have to be ready for this pre-K additional students coming into our district. And we want to have that offering in the neighborhood elementary schools. So whether you go A or B was all done for the pre-K through 4 or pre-K through 5. That's why we're sitting here today. That's why we've gone through and studied all these things, spent all this money, looked at all these different options. But it appears through the data that the emotional side came through of we're not ready for that yet. So 430 some pages of comments that we were given. Yeah. I read, I think, 436 pages of comments, and there are solid feedback from all angles. But we have to make a decision, because whether we do scenario A or scenario B, we are going to enhance Midland Public Schools,
Yes.
because we have schools that are really old, and we haven't done enough to keep them up. So now, if we have this 3, 4, 5 year window before we even open the front door, we got to go. So neither one is a loss for the children.
That's a great point.
We just aren't ready as a community to let go of the two schools and the rivalry. Plain and simple?
It is, but
Yep.
what I'm hearing is that this is too expensive. And we're leaning towards scenario A, which is the more expensive option,
Correct.
which is what I'm having trouble getting my arms
Yep.
around. And I wonder, and I think it might benefit the community to know, again, let's see, Phil said what our comparable millages were for our neighboring districts in addition to our elite comparison group. We're significantly low. We're significantly lower than our elite comparison group, and also schools in the area. So I think it would help the community to understand exactly what that difference is in. So I'm seeing the data, which is saying we want to go with scenario A, which is a lot more expensive, but I'm hearing people say, well, it's too expensive. So that's where I'm having trouble.
Is there a fear factor that was kind of created by this survey, in that if we don't go with A, which is what the data, limited amount of data that we have says, that we are afraid this bond won't pass and will devastate the general fund, because all of the work that has to be done has to be paid for. And if we don't have, like you've said throughout this meeting, this bond provides relief that our general fund will need to achieve those ends. And if we don't have a successful bond, that money comes out of the classroom, sadly, to pay for a roof, to pay for a parking lot,
Yes.
to pay for a boiler.
And our facilities just continue to
And they
age
continue to
without a
age.
solution.
Yes.
Well, I think Brad said it extremely well. We launched this endeavor to address 3 issues: elementary space and pre-K for our littles, and a building that has to be replaced in Northeast. And scenario A does that. Particularly MPS is something that needs to change as an evolution, not a revolution. And I think the community feedback has been that scenario B is probably too much of a revolution at this point in time. Can we interpret from this data that 75% of our survey respondents are saying, yes, we understand you need to spend money on the district? She said yes twice. The bulk of the funding is spent on those two priorities of building the new elementary school and replacing Northeast. So when I think about what money that we spend now on a two high school scenario could potentially be, may potentially only have a 10-year life or 20-year life, it would be fairly limited in scope, I believe, and Daryl can help us with these, but Midland and Dow combined would be about 16 million, and then it'd be, you know, what portions of those could be saved if you ever did replace one of those two buildings or combined in the future. So I think from a sustainability aspect, we're trying to really make sure that we're only spending a very limited amount of the taxpayer money on the assets that may change in the future, and the bulk of the funding is spent on those two key priorities that we set out with 2 years ago, which is elementary space combined with pre-K and then replacing a Northeast.
I will say that I think I'm in a similar position as John Lauterbach. I heard the community. I read hundreds of pages of comments. I will say that I found a number of the comments to be, I don't know if anecdotal is the right word, but you know, the Midland Dow rivalry, I understand it's important. I didn't go to, Midland or Dow, but I did go to school in a town that had a very fierce rivalry. And certainly I would have feelings if, you know, my school closed. However, I think that we have to look forward, and I think that comments regarding the rivalry are looking present and past and not envisioning what our future could look like and how we could really make the greatest facilities for all of our students, not just one new elementary and one new middle school. And I understand that there will be upgrades to all the schools. The other thing that really struck me was the number of comments about the cost, but a lot of the comments seem to compare A to B, and they seem to be saying that B costs too much, but yet A costs more. And then to kind of talk about something that's already been spoken about here, but under A, we're going to maintain 9, what I'm going to call old buildings, and we're going to spend the money to upgrade and maintain those. Under B, we're going to maintain 8. So we're going to maintain fewer old schools, which means we're going to have lower costs of maintenance with a brand new school that will, I assume, will have limited funds, you know, obviously some maintenance required, but will just cost less generally. So I'm grudgingly going to discuss A, but I think that A is a tiny bit short-sighted compared to B.
So I'm actually honestly less certain now than I was at the beginning of this conversation, to be honest. And I'm just going to put that out there because if so many of us, like I get the survey data, and I also hear the people say cost, and we need a new elementary school. We need new buildings, and we need them now. We need to be on a ballot soon. But I think I'm not sure that we're necessarily ready to go for the same thing, and that feels weird to me because I didn't necessarily feel that way walking in. So I'm sorry. But I'm going to be real about it because I want to make sure that we're doing the best thing for our students now and our students in the future and our community.
so we had sort of consensus on this side, Brad.
Grudging consensus.
Yes, 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 no, duly noted, but
I think the question is, how do you weigh being a good steward of the money we may receive from the community versus listening to the feedback of the community, right? Like we want to do, we want to do both, but they're very contradictory right now.
they do. And so the piece I want to layer into that is a yes vote at the ballot.
When we look at the totality of the feedback, I appreciate the input of our businesses thinking about talent attraction to our community, but frankly, the citizens that we have now matter way more as a district. And we can grow our own, and we can grow the talent that every business needs. Okay? And we have addressed continually is we are a progressive growth district, and we need to address some key learning deficiencies comparative to how good we are at the middle school and high school level in our elementary buildings. Again, to Penny's feedback and where she's trying to go, the most important thing for us to focus on is the littles. Both scenarios do, but I think scenario A is first and foremost listening to our community. Does no harm to a future scenario B if the community ever decided to do that in the future. Ann pointed out we do have to be a fiduciary to the taxpayer, and we are. But I think our taxpayers are telling us, go with scenario A. I'm not going to tell them no.
How do you process that in alignment with scenario A?
Begrudgingly ready to go for A. I mean, like that's where I think we're all
Okay.
are.
Brad?
I don't want to use that word. I don't think that that's right at all. My personal opinion. If we are going out and we're going to invest $200 million into our students and into Midland Public Schools and into our children, I'm not begrudgingly about anything.
You're right. Thank you, Brad.
But what the public does need to understand, that we have the ripple effect of two of everything,
Sure.
which sometimes turns into four of everything. That, in the long term, is not sustainable if we have a couple tick downs in our total overall student count. So, I would just want to say, we asked, you told us scenario A is where we are at today, November 11th, 2024. Start moving in that direction. I think that's what we need to do. But we, as the Board of Education, are saying back to the public, we may be back talking about this or planning for this as soon as 4 or 5 years from now, once we get, maybe even before we get these things shovel ready. I don't think we should ever lose this momentum of all this information that we've gathered, and we see that in the long term, a community high school. But I just want the public to know that 4, 5, 6, 7 years from now, we're gonna be really talking about scenario B and going in that direction. We still have aging facilities across the district. They're old, and we have to be great stewards of the money that the public is willing to invest in our district. But at the same time, this is not a one-time ask. We're coming back in the future and we're going to work together, and we probably will be working in that direction.
And I see others sort of leaning into that too. So I'm taking that we are at consensus that A is where we want to dig in. So why don't we start then with the A itself? And Sarah, maybe you can help me. We'll just go back to the visual. I got it, actually. My clicker's working. Let's just take a look at this. So A, as it stands, a new elementary with preschool programming distributed across those elementaries, and we're building a new middle school. As we look more closely at that, I want to remind us of the infrastructure pieces that we talked about on the critical needs slide.